Rapid detachment assault platoon, tactical innovations on the Russian side. On the Russian side, one significant innovation during the winter and spring period was the revitalization of infantry tactics, which involved a somewhat cumbersome and slow transition from conventional mechanized infantry tactics to the new so-called assault tactics. We now have knowledge of the essence of this tactic, thanks in part to a captured Russian manual and the work of Russian and Ukrainian analysts. The title of the captured document is Specific of Conducting Combat Operations in Urban, Settlement and Forested Protected Terrain as Assault Detachment Units, Company and Platoon levels. In connection with this, the immediate question arises: what is forested protected terrain and what is an assault detachment in this context? Open terrain. Let's start from the beginning. What is the goal of the entire innovation? In short, to overcome enemy fortified positions frontally. Why? Because open terrain, theoretically suitable for maneuvering, are extensively mined in practice and controlled by drones and observation posts. Moreover, they are heavily bombarded with a large number of long-range and highly destructive heavy artillery and missile launchers. The enemy trenches, to put it mildly, are filled with ATGMs, anti-tank guided missiles, and various portable anti-tank missile systems and tank destroyers. Forests, cities. Therefore, experience shows that it is less costly in terms of resources and manpower to advance through forested areas, including actual forests, although there are fewer of them, or tree lines between fields as well as through urbanized zones, compared to these open terrains that are theoretically more favorable for mechanized warfare. However, these areas are more strongly occupied by the enemy, in this case the Ukrainian infantry. That's why a new and more effective tactic was needed, resulting in the creation of this new manual, most likely at the end of 2022. Battalion group. By that time, of course, the early war concept of universal battalion groups had long ceased to exist. I won't go into great detail about how it worked, however, its main problems were as follows. Low tolerance for losses. Since these units had a little bit of everything, but only in small quantities, losing just one component could render the entire unit combat ineffective. Insufficient number of infantry, complex logistics, difficulty in adapting to small unit tactics. The latter was primarily due to the presence of enemy artillery, which made larger troop concentration highly dangerous and counterproductive. According to British intelligence, by November, the Russians had abolished the last of the battalion tactical groups, BTGs, completely giving way to larger formations such as thousands and brigades that approached the organizational strengths due to mobilization. The advantage of the latter, due to their larger size, is better loss tolerance, more organized logistics, and being cohesive units rather than ad hoc formations like battalion tactical groups. This means greater unit cohesion and a more experienced personnel, except for the mostly mobilized crew. All of this is good for defense, but not for offense. For offensive operations, specialized units that excel in small unit tactics are necessary, and these became the assault divisions. They operate within the framework of the respective regiment or brigade, utilizing their logistics and personnel. This theoretically allows them to benefit from the advantages of loss tolerance and logistics while having their own leadership structure and a structure that is suitable for small unit tactics. The assault divisions consist of a command unit, 2-3 assault companies and a platoon of tanks. Additionally, there are reconnaissance, drone and electronic warfare units, a light flamethrower platoon equipped with RPOA small soldier-launched thermobaric rockets, and air defense group equipped with 23mm anti-aircraft guns and man-portable air defense missile systems, a heavy weapons platoon equipped with Court heavy machine guns, ATGMs, sniper teams, and ATGS-17 automatic grenade launcher, various artillery batteries, preferably non-self-propelled mortars, and D-30 Todd howitzer, and an assault engineer group, a combat engineer and medical evacuation team. According to the document, each supporting group could be directly assigned to one of the assault companies. The assault companies themselves consist of 2 assault platoons, an armored group consisting of 4 infantry fighting vehicles and 1 tank, an artillery platoon with 2 mortars and 1 122mm howitzer, a fire support platoon, a medical rescue group, and a reserve platoon, which must include at least 1 machine gun team. The individual mortars had to be assigned to the assault platoons depending on the situation. The assault platoons were composed of 9 personnel and were divided into so-called troikas. Unless the situation dictated otherwise, these troikas were required to move in a diamond formation as shown in the diagram. Among them, the vanguard troika consisted of a machine gunner, an assault engineer, and an assistant machine gunner. Troika 1 consisted of a scout, an RPG gunner, and an assistant RPG gunner. Troika 2 consisted of an assault engineer, a senior rifleman, a non-commissioned officer, and a medic. The third troika, which was at the end of the formation, was the platoon command, consisting of the platoon leader. It is important to note that the platoon leader had to be an officer, and the drone operator and the radio operator. Obviously, these 9 individuals may not be many, but according to the guide, it could be reinforced in various ways depending on the ask, reaching a level of 20-30 personnel that appears more like a platoon. The reinforcement could include sniper pairs, Court heavy machine guns, grenade launchers, or even tanks, essentially anything that could be called in from the higher level. Placing officers on the front line is undoubtedly a significant achievement of the tactics, as is the fact that it relies more on specialists rather than sheer manpower or the quantity of military equipment, which, by the way, couldn't be called in by the assault platoon, company or battalion commander in large quantities. What undoubtedly goes against the new tactics is that it requires the collaboration of numerous different branches of the military and various specialists. In other words, it is challenging to implement without a well-trained or experienced combat force. Now that we know the composition of the teams, let's take a look at some common combat procedures. Let's start with terrain protected by forests. In the Donetsk basin, terrain protected by forests primarily refers to forest strips, forest precipices, and often rows of trees between fields, excluding larger forests like the one near the Siversky Donets River, such as Kremena. In forested areas, the effectiveness of enemy infantry and artillery reconnaissance is significantly lower, and there is also more cover available for attackers compared to open fields. Therefore, if the attack can be carried out skillfully, the losses will be much smaller, even if the enemy typically defends such terrain with more defensive lines than they would in open terrain. Before the attack, the assault platoon conducts reconnaissance using its own quadcopter, and then the reconnaissance team of the platoon visits the approach routes. Then the platoon proceeds with the actual advancement, removing any obstacles, mines, and other hindrances, and occupying positions of cover, for now avoiding direct combat. Artillery preparations are planned during this time, both for the front line and the depths of the area. This is partly carried out by heavy artillery, but the units supporting tanks and armored vehicles also open fire from the flanks in a staggered and surprise manner to avoid counter-battery fire. Ultimately, the artillery bombardment aims to neutralize all identified targets, even if it takes days to accomplish. The actual point of the attack should preferably be concealed, whether by creating artificial fog or through other means. 1 minute before the actual attack, the artillery barrage must shift from targeting the first Ukrainian defense line to the second line. This serves several purposes: to avoid friendly fire on the first line, to suppress the second line, and to create a wall of fire ahead of the enemy's rear areas, preventing them from moving reinforcements forward. The capture of the enemy's already destroyed first line is taken order by AGS grenade launchers, RPGs, and supporting armored vehicles. Members of the assault platoon slowly advance under the cover of trees. Their primary objective is to try to eliminate the enemy forces trapped in the enemy trenches, primarily using hand grenades and thermobaric rockets. After this is accomplished, the artillery continues firing for another 1.5 hours onto the terrain behind the captured line, allowing time for the infantry to dig in. Engineers. In theory, during this time, the former Ukrainian positions cannot be used, as the Ukrainians may have previously set up tricky traps and explosive devices or had them surveyed in advance for their artillery. During this 1.5 hours, the members of the assault platoon must dig foxholes, placing machine guns and ATGMs, replenish water and ammunition, and the medical evacuation team tends to the wounded while the assault troops focus on the battle. Subsequently, the foxholes are naturally connected to form trenches. And that's it. The possible continuation of the attack from this point on is the responsibility of the second echelon. Well, this guide essentially incorporates everything relevant, from the experience of Soviet assault engineer battalions employed at the end of World War II to small group tactics employed by the Chechens in wars against the Russians, as well as the sorcery tactic mentioned in American manuals, and quite a few innovations. Whoever wrote it, it truly is a masterpiece. However, it is also evident that it is overly complex. The soldiers were not trained for this before the war. The reminders during mobilization training did not teach this, and as a matter of fact, it is not easy to teach a completely new tactic on the front lines, especially when not everyone shows willingness for it. As a result, the overall picture does not fully come together in practice. Ukrainian positions are often not targeted during the attack. Minefields are not fully or only partially cleared. The development of artificial fog is considered a curiosity. It was hardly used anywhere before February 2023, and even since then its use is slowly spreading among the troops. Of course, there are units that learn well, such as the paratroopers and the Wagner group. Some claim that Wagner has been employing this tactic for a long time, and a significant portion of this manual was based on their experiences. However, the same cannot be said for the Marine infantry. Among the formations of the ground forces, the situation is mixed, with the Donetsk and Luhansk units as well as the mobilized forces currently making only attempts to master this. Continuing with the description of possible combat situations. If a breakthrough is required in open terrain, the attack is initiated by a tank with the fire support of the assault platoon's infantry fighting vehicles. The infantry fighting vehicles fire from the rear, sides and the edge of the forest covered area. The tank exposes the weak points of the enemy's fire system, and after adequate preparation, the assault begins against the enemy. These are the first 1 or 2 platoons, if we are talking about Wagner, which often consist of former convicts. If we are talking about the regular army, then they are formed from penal units and mobilized personnel. Therefore, because this task is the most dangerous, if they managed to fully expose and destroy the enemy's fire system with their help, then the normal, better trained and therefore more valuable assault platoons will proceed to occupy the enemy position. The document extensively covers urban warfare, laying down the following basic principles, which it strongly appears Wagner strictly adheres to during the battles in Bakhmut. The assault platoon must not move on the roads or in alignment with them, since the enemy is most prepared for defense in those areas. The assault platoon needs to blast holes, or the supporting tanks and infantry fighting vehicles need to create openings in the walls of the targeted buildings, forming alternative entry routes and bypassing the enemy's established defenses. If a particular building appears excessively fortified, it should not be directly attacked. Instead, the area surrounding the building must be occupied, leaving the artillery to deal with the building itself. Eventually, before it collapses, the enemy will abandon it, making it easier to eliminate them. Furthermore, another important rule is that observation points should not be established on the rooftops of buildings. This is obviously due to drones and snipers, who are particularly likely to target and neutralize soldiers on rooftops. In short, this concludes the description of the new Russian tactics. They are being increasingly and effectively implemented. In January, it was widespread only in Bakhmut, in February also in Kremin and Marinka, and starting from March in Avdiivka. While not of decisive significance, it can be considered relatively important. Thank you for your kind attention. I was Huba Üveges.